Yes. Welcome. I'd like to welcome members and officers to this Cabinet meeting and also to welcome anyone watching online. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to take attendance of officers attending virtually and to explain how proceedings will work. Susan?
Good evening. Can I confirm the following officers joining remotely can hear us and that we can hear them? Steve Crowley?
Yes, present.
Good evening. Rachel Rooney?
Yes, I'm here.
Good evening. Nigel Smith?
Good evening, present.
Are there any other officers in attendance remotely tonight that I haven't called out? Speaking. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. Are there any questions? I will now hand back to the chair.
Thank you. Item 1, apologies for absence. I've received apologies for absence from councillors Laura Williams, Sean Nolan and Vijay Pupil-Singham. Are there further apologies? Thank you. Item 2, minutes from the meeting 17th of February 2026. I'd like to propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting of Cabinet held on 17th February 2026. Can I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Albert. Any comments? Here's the vote.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Other business. There's been no other business notified. Item 4, Chair's announcements. In accordance with Council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recordings will be available both on the Council's YouTube channel as well as on the Council's Modgums site alongside the documents for the meeting. Members are reminded this Council has declared both a climate emergency and an ecological emergency. These are serious decisions and mean that, as it's an emergency, all of us, Council officers and members, have that in mind as we carry out our various roles and tasks for the benefit of our district. More details are included on the agenda sheet, front sheet. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. For the purpose of clarification, 4.8.23a of the Constitution does not apply to this meeting. Therefore, a member may leave the room during the debate and consideration of that item and be able to vote. However, please be mindful of the business of the agenda. Whenever possible, leave at the appropriate point in the proceedings. Item 5, public participation. There is none. Item 6, items referred from other committees. 6A, Overview and Scrutiny Committee, lease on Letchworth multi-storey car park, to be considered with item 10. 6B, Overview and Scrutiny Committee, RIPA, updated annual review, to be considered with item 11. 6C, Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Section 106 Tasks and Finish Group Report, to be considered with item 12. 6D, Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Council Delivery Plan 25 to 26. Q3 Update, to consider with item 13. 6E, Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, third quarter Treasury Management Review 25-26 to be considered with item 14. 6F, Finance Audit and Risk Committee, third quarter Capital Budget Monitoring Review 25-26 to be considered with item 15. 6G, Finance and Audit and Risk Committee, third quarter Revenue Budget Monitoring 25-26 to be considered with item 16. Brings us on to item 7, Strategic Planning Matters. Councillor Donna Wright to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides an update on the position on key planning and transport issues affecting the Council since the last update in January. So just briefly, the main items to note are firstly, changes to the National Planning Policy Framework. So as Cabinet will be aware, a revised NPPF consultation was published in December and closed on the 10th of March this year. The Council submitted a detailed response that can be found in Appendix A that reflected the motion passed by Council in January, which raised concerns about how villages are treated in relation to Grey Belt and the potential for villages to merge with each other or with neighbouring towns. The response also included comments around the relationship between the new National Development Management policies and local plans and risks around legal uncertainty. The expanded presumption in favour of sustainable development, we are basically supportive of this in principle, but concerned about its application outside settlements. The response also made comments about the proposed changes to affordable housing, density and medium-sized sites and tensions between climate change ambitions and limits on local policy making. So all comments are laid out in the committee documents. The draft response was sent to Cabinet before it was submitted, so you did all get a chance to comment on it. And it was also reviewed by Councillor Peace, who was the proposer for the Council motion. This was outside the norm, just to say, because usually consultations and responses are prepared by the officers and signed off by the executive member. They don't normally go to Cabinet and they certainly don't go to Council. So in case there's any questions on that. A parallel response was submitted by the Hertfordshire Infrastructure and Planning Partnership, of which we are a member, which was broadly supportive of ambition of the changes, but expressed concerns about deliverability and loss of local flexibility. Again, this response is included in your pack of papers. Spatial development strategies, the government consulted between February and March on the proposed boundaries for new spatial development strategies, which are being introduced as part of the new plan making system. The consultation proposes Hertfordshire as the most appropriate geography for the SDS. This approach has been supported by the Hertfordshire Growth Board on behalf of local authorities. Obviously, subject to LGR, HCCC will be responsible for preparing the SDS with further details on its scope and timetable expected later in the year. So we will update you on that. The new local plan making system, the new regulations finally came into force on the 21st of March after considerable delay, and that's replacing the 2012 system. Key features include a 30-month maximum timetable for preparing a local plan, prescribed stages and statutory consultation points, removal of the formal duty to cooperate, but there is a continued expectation of collaboration. There's also going to be an increased emphasis on standardised digital and vision-led plans. Further consultations were also launched in March on planning committee reforms and schemes of delegation, increases in planning fees, and also a directive requiring referral to ministers of some major housing refusals. Amendments to building regulations introduce future homes and building standards from March. And the idea is that these regs will ensure new homes will become zero carbon in use as the electricity grid decarbonises. The local plan review, following the national regulations coming into force, The council will formally publish a notice of intention to review the local plan and a revised timetable this month. A mandatory minimum 4-month get ready period will run until October. The other milestones are included in the paper that you've received. The intention is to submit the plan for examination in early 2028 ahead of LGR. No formal decisions are required from Cabinet at this stage, but there will be further reports later in the year. Proposed expansion of Luton Airport. As we all know, the Secretary of State approved the airport expansion in April last year, increasing capacity from 19 million to 32 million passengers. A judicial review was dismissed in November, but the appellant, Luton and District Association for the Control of Aircraft Noise, has been granted permission to appeal, and the Court of Appeal hearing is expected in May. Subject to legal outcomes, Luton Rising intends to progress implementation later this year. Early considerations will include the proposed replacement country park that will be located within North Herts, along with establishing the monitoring and review groups required by the consent. There will continue to be ongoing North Herts officer involvement in the monitoring and mitigation processes, and we will provide further updates when we know. Strategic sites in the local plan. These are outlined in section 8.2 of the paper, which outlines the progress on the 6 largest strategic sites, which are all moving forwards. Other significant sites are progressing through planning performance agreements and pre-application discussions. Just a word on neighbouring authorities' local plans. North Herts continues to maintain close contact with 8 neighbouring authorities, despite the formal duty to cooperate being removed under the NPPF changes. However, inspectors will still test strategic collaboration as part of the local plan examinations. The North Herts draft town centre strategy that you all saw at previous meetings was consulted on between 3rd of December and 30th of January, and officers are currently undertaking an analysis of the consultation responses. And it's expected that the final document will be presented to Cabinet for adoption in June, July this year. A supporting delivery plan will be prepared during the autumn and winter in collaboration with the economic development team. So I think to conclude, the overall risks we have for strategic planning are the tight timescales under the new 30-month local plan system, but this is being carefully monitored and managed. Obviously, there's still ongoing uncertainty from the high volumes of national consultation documents that are coming out of the government, but we are dealing with these as they come in. Obviously, resource pressures within the planning team, but at the moment this is being managed. And obviously the continuing legal uncertainty around the Luton Airport expansion. I think the overall key messages are that the major planning reforms are now live and will significantly reshape plan making. And we will be providing training for PCC members and other members. The strategic sites are progressing, but the infrastructure and legal agreements remain critical. Continued collaboration with neighbours and countrywide planning is essential, particularly in preparation for LGR. So finally, Chair, I would like to propose that Cabinet notes the report and the proposed next steps.
Thank you, Councillor Wright, for a very thorough report. Do you have any questions? Any questions? Okay. So Councillor Wright has said what we need to note the report on strategic planning matters and endorse the responses in appendices A, B and C and the proposed next steps in relation to the local plan review. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Wright, propose, and a seconder. Councillor Allen. Daniel.
Second, Chair.
Debate. Councillor Daniel Allen.
Thank you, Donna, for a very good summing up of a very in-depth report. We're very excited to see this much development happening, sensible and needed development happening around North Herts, and know that we're now going to have the opportunity to keep supporting our residents with super good new homes. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments in the debate? I've got a proposal. What's a seconder? Should we go to the vote? Ruth, Susan?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 8 is the Renters' Right Act. Councillor Mick Debenham to present the report, please.
Very much. The Renters' Right Act 2025 will come into effect on the 1st of May this year. This is a landmark piece of legislation which will transform the private rented sector. The whole of the bill is attached to this report, but I'd just like to highlight some of the key elements within it. The bill will bring to an end the so-called no-fault evictions by abolishing Section 21 of the Housing Act 1988. This is, however, balanced by making it easier for landlords to evict tenants who commit antisocial behaviour or are in serious and persistent rent arrears. If landlords wish to move into or sell their property, they can, but must now give 4 months' notice. Most tenancies will become annual periodic assured tenancies rather than the fixed terms, giving greater security to tenants. Rent increases will be limited to 1 a year, with the tenant notified 2 months in advance. There will also be an end to rented bidding, so nobody will be able to offer more than the advertised price to secure a tenancy. It will also become illegal to discriminate against renters who have children or receive benefits, and there will be an end to the blanket ban on pets. With regard to ourselves and other local authorities, new investigative powers will give councils an ability to inspect properties, demand documents, and access third-party data to crack down on rogue landlords. Councils will be requested to report enforcement activity. Councils must investigate allegations of unlawful eviction or harassment and, if necessary, initiate legal action or impose civil penalties. As a result of the new obligations placed upon us, we will have to make amendments to council policies as outlined in Recommendation 2.1, points 1 to 3, in order to be compliant with the new legislation, plus adoption of new policies with regard to housing authority enforcement at point 2.1, points 4 and 5. Recommendation 2.2 asks that any future amendments to policies be delegated from Cabinet to the Director of Regulatory in consultation with the executive member. I'd just like to say that the government have recognised the cost implications in rewriting and implementing these policies. We've already received £33,000 for the last financial year and have been promised a further £55,000 for the next and £26,000 for the one after that to assist us. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our officers for their hard work in getting these in place before the 1st of May deadline. In this respect, we are considerably further down the line than many other authorities, so a big thank you to all those involved.
Thank you very much, Councillor Debenham. Any questions for Councillor Debenham? Councillor Albert.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Mick and all the team for all the work that's been done on this. It's a huge amount. I thank Frank and obviously other colleagues. I guess the question in my mind is just really understanding what we think very specifically what we think we'll need to do differently, and to what extent. And obviously, Mick's obviously touched on the additional resources. To what extent we think we've got the right level of resources and things to do now. I know it's really hard to say at the moment because it hasn't really even started yet. But I think that's obviously one of the key challenges. And obviously, I know Frank's been going around the sort of community sort of forum meeting, and thank you for that. It was very helpful to come around and obviously address residents and councillors on that. But I guess obviously also making sure that there's a that our websites and other information is updated, and it's certainly, I think, going to be an area I'm interested to hear how we can keep, I think, councillors and indeed residents updated on the way things are happening and things that might be useful for us to know. But that sort of resource question, I'm really interested perhaps to understand a bit more about.
I'd like to answer that. Is Frank Harrison?
Thank you, Councillor Albert. And yes, I'll happily try to answer all those questions. Certainly from a resource question and response, we think we got enough. Certainly, the answer as to how much work will this entail, we can only go on the judgment of our colleagues in similar positions in other local authorities, guidance, and to some extent supposition from the government, MHCLG, and other colleagues in, all involved in this. There's a collective group called Jigsaw, which has been set up by the government so that we can work with local authorities to guide, advise, present templates, etc. on this. And certainly the information that they are providing thus far is that the likelihood of certainly investigation leading to prosecution action will significantly increase, especially for those local authorities where they are known to have rogue landlords, criminal involvement in the private rented sector. Whilst I don't entirely know the entire complex of the landlord private sector rental sector we have in this district, all the evidence we have is that we don't have that criminal fraternity very active in our district. But where there is some involvement, clearly we'll focus on those. Time will inevitably tell as to whether we have adequate resources. Certainly the team who will deliver this, our Environmental Protection and Housing Group, it has the officers involved, present, employed. We're fully staffed in this sector. We have other vacancies that we need to look at, but not in this sector. And whilst all officers are learning how we will deliver the RRA, fingers crossed, if that's the right phrase, we should be able to accommodate this. We certainly have, as Councillor Debenham mentioned, received and are likely to receive more additional burdens funding. I've literally just had an update today to say that the funding we were due to get this year has actually been increased, or appears to be increased. So we're not going to refuse that. We are using some of the additional funding we've received, and will continue to use that funding to employ people if we need to. We have a contractor at the moment covering work which my service manager is developing on the RRA. So fingers crossed we'll be all right. We are likely to have an increase in the amount of enforcement prosecution work, but I'm just hoping it will be manageable, and certainly not as much as many other local authorities will have. I hope that covers all the key points. Thank you.
Did you want to follow up question?
Just, I mean, I guess obviously that, and obviously then looking at Isabel to make sure she's got resources in terms of legal, but I guess in an LGR context, are we? I mean, I think, and I know obviously, for example, in obviously has been done like revenue and benefits sort of area that, I'm responsible for there's a really good county network of councils working together on this. Is there a similar network in relation to this sort of established, I guess, understanding best practice and, good ideas and, how different, colleagues in other authorities are dealing with much the same sorts of issues?
Should I answer? Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Albert. Jigsaw is an organisation which has been set up largely with the government and government funding. They are council officers. We cover the whole country, or England and Wales anyway, in regard specifically for the implementation of the RRA. The Association of Chief EHOs is also associated with this. And they have been involved in the drafting of the template policies that we're submitting this evening. So there is a very broad brush and broad involvement of officers countrywide. Certainly across Hertfordshire, all of the other Hertfordshire district councils are currently involved in comparing and assisting each other with the development of this, the RRA in the next few months. Whilst we clearly haven't considered or implemented movements for what will happen post LGR, we are aware that there will be a change in a couple of years' time. Certainly with the adoption of the templated policies that we have here, which is also being adopted by, or proposed to be adopted by, a number of the other local authorities in Hertfordshire, there shouldn't be any significant disparity between what we have in place, fingers crossed, hopefully from tomorrow, to what those other authorities have when they go through their processes. So hopefully we should be uniform on that basis as well. Thank you.
Councillor Daniel Allen.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to see the Labour government giving councils like ours the tools, powers and funding to bear down on the minority of bad landlords and agents and ensure the increased rights of our tenants in the private rented sector are protected. Question is, do we have any news on the new ombudsman that's being introduced to support tenants and landlords?
Certainly. Thank you, Councillor Allen. Yes, we do have news. There will be a new local government ombudsman specifically for tenants. The good news associated with that is the government is outlining plans as to what that role will be, and it is proposed to be and I paraphrase, a more rapid means for a tenant to receive a redress for any issues that are raised, specifically issues of disrepair, minor non-compliance, etc. It does pose challenges for the enforcement of the Renters' Rights Act. One being what will differentiate the role of the new ombudsman as opposed to what our role will be in this. There is a significant degree of potential overlap, and that overlap will need to be clarified, because otherwise there runs the risk of the tenant not knowing who to respond to, applying to the wrong agency, etc., etc. So that is one issue. The other minor drawback on the new ombudsman, it won't be in place until probably 2027 at the earliest. The Renters' Rights Act brings in a whole raft of new tools for us to use. Unfortunately, the only thing that's in at the moment is the investigative powers aspect, which came in over Christmas, and the introduction from 1st of May next month of giving us the powers to implement essentially the aspects of illegal evictions. The rest of it will be phased in over the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years. Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Thank you. Councillor Tamsin-Thomas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I've been really struck by how visible this legislation is in my conversations with residents in our district. It's come up very organically in conversations, which I think is actually quite rare for the most part, how often that happens. And I'm just sort of interested in your take, Frank, in terms of who in our context in North Herts you think are going to be the main sort of beneficiaries. It's sort of linked to the resourcing question, but just your sort of take on who you think the main sort of types of scenario or the types of resident who are going to be benefiting from that, but on the flip side where you see that might potentially put challenges in place as we make that transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I think the net beneficiaries for this will be initially the private landlord tenants or tenants of the private rented sector. Tenants of the social landlord sector, they already have a substantive degree of protection, and to a lesser degree, some of that protection is from moral grounds rather than just the law. because a number of the larger social landlords at least don't like to be seen to be doing things wrong. So I think the initial rollout of the Renters' Rights Act has been set to target those in the private rented sector. I mentioned earlier, we don't have a good understanding of who our private landlords are. We know of a number who are somewhat questionable, shall we say, but the vast majority are, to be honest, unknown to us. We believe them to be largely individuals who have either purchased additional homes as a supplement to their pensions, private investments, or more likely inherited from family members, and they thus then put the properties out to rent. And as such, we believe them to be a small, small housing stock landlords, 1, 2, maybe 3 houses. We are seeking to undertake work this year, part of our housing condition survey, to get a better understanding of that. So, if we then end up with a different opinion, then so be it. But certainly, that's our perception. We also believe that a number of tenants in the private rented sector are reluctant to come and speak to us because of the current risk, which will end in a few weeks' time, of the compensatory eviction response. We don't have any real evidence of that. It's certainly information that we've gleaned from colleagues elsewhere in the country, and the perception of the fact of the no blame eviction provision still being present, that is a foreseeable response if the tenant complains about their landlord. So I suppose to benefit, we're hoping it will benefit initially the private sector tenants. The second part of your question, who it will then adversely affect, we have already received some concern from a number of small private landlords of, again, I paraphrase, I'm getting out of this sector before it gets too late. Certainly the approach we're taking and the underlying requirement of this new legislation is for us to prosecute first as a key response, rather than, as we're currently doing, going through a graduated response of advice, support, notice, and then prosecute for non-compliance. But this Renters' Rights Act flips that on its head, which is why we do need to change the respective policies. But certainly what we are going to develop and deliver is we will still provide all the advice that we can up front, and we are updating our web pages actively as we speak. Most of our information is currently on our tenants charter pages, but we will also link to the new M8CLG housing hub, which has just been released, and we'll link to that accordingly. We will also actively try and encourage our communications team to publicise what information private landlords need, basically to get it right before we get involved. But we're also going to take advantage of the government's softening of their prosecution requirement, whereby they've diluted their prosecute first stance to prosecute unless you know for certain the landlord will comply. Doesn't seem a big change, but it is a significant change whereby we can at least now consider working with the landlords before we actively prosecute, which was M8CLG's initial stance. So long-windedly, I hope that answers all your questions, but if not, happy to carry on. Thank you.
I was sort of thinking from a perspective, there's been a lot of coverage of pet owners as one sort of category, but I'm also sort of thinking about more like first-time renters, people moving out of home, people coming to the elder years, in terms of that sort of segmentation. But is that something that over the course of the next year we'll start to understand more as we've got a greater focus on the private sector? Because obviously it's hugely, you've got families and it's just hugely varied, and the vulnerabilities of those groups are quite varied as well.
Absolutely. How the new regime impacts any tenant, we obviously yet to determine over time. The protection offered by the Renters' Rights Act won't essentially give carte blanche to the tenants. There are a number of current restrictions which are being removed. The absolute non-provision of accommodation to tenants with animals, likewise with people in receipt of benefits, likewise in children, they are being removed. It doesn't mean that tenants will automatically have that right. It just means the landlord will have to have a better reason to not provide that accommodation. And if they follow that approach, their justification will have to be what will be deemed to be reasonable. Merely saying, I'm not having a dog in my house because I don't like dogs is not adequate. You know, likewise, I'm not having a dog because it will mean more in-depth cleaning will not be adequate, because those sorts of provisions can be made, you know, as part of the tenancy. So we'll have to wait and see what the guidance shows, but it's certainly, I think, giving a clearer picture of what tenants can hope to achieve and hope to receive once the new legislation comes in a few weeks' time.
Can I just say that we're not sure whether your name's appearing on the screen if you want to speak. So if you feel you're being ignored, please put your hand up. Having said that, any more questions? I think that Councillor Devon actually read out most of 2.1, 2.2 before. Can we have a proposer, please?
I would very much like to propose that.
Thank you, Councillor Devon. And a seconder? Councillor Thomas? Thank you. Should we go to debate? Definitely nobody on the screen. So I just want to make a comment. I think that life is hard, particularly for young people and young people starting out, and living in a world of high rents and uncertainty must be very, very difficult. And I think this will be a great help to a lot of people, particularly young people, and give them more faith that they actually will get onto the housing ladder and that they've got some control over their lives. So let's hope it goes well. Shall we have the vote, please, Susan?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 9, arrangements for carrying out public health funerals. Councillor McDedman to present the report.
Thank you very much. Every local authority is legally required to make necessary funeral arrangements for anybody who dies in their district where no other suitable arrangements are being or are likely to be made. The purpose of this report is to formally set out what is in practice already being carried out. Our environmental health team deal with all aspects of the organisation of the funeral, including registering the death, arranging the funeral with undertakers and paying for it. The council will not part fund the funeral and will only arrange a basic funeral. This will be held in Wilbury Hill Cemetery in Letchworth unless the council's burial records reveal that the deceased owns a grave elsewhere within the district. There will be a dignified service with coffin, transport to the cemetery and a hearse with sufficient pallbearers. There will also be a celebrant of either religious or non-religious types to carry out a short graveside service. The policy also sets measures to be followed to try to locate a will and to try to identify anything of value to offset the funeral costs. These are covered in the recommendations 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. And as per the previous one, 2.4 would ask for any future amendment to this policy to be delegated to the Director of Regulatory in conjunction with the executive member.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No? Do you wish me to read out the recommendations? Go on then. 2.1. Adopt the policy as presented. Please note this format has been adopted as this document is made available to our residents to help them through the requirements necessary to arrange a funeral should they need to. 2.2. Note that under the provisions of Section 46 of the Act, each local authority has a responsibility to make necessary funeral arrangements for anybody who dies in their district where no other suitable arrangements are being or like to be made. This policy sets out how the council will deliver this duty and outlines the limitations of this obligation. 2.4. Note what measures will be followed to try to locate a will, identify relatives who may wish to arrange a funeral, and identify anything of value to offset the cost of funerals. The policy also confirms that should the council arrange the funeral, we will provide a simple but dignified service administered by a minister, representative of another faith, or a civil funeral celebrant, as well as permitting friends and family to attend the service. 2.5. Delegate future amendments of this policy to the Director Regulatory in consultation with the Executive Member Rotary in accordance with the provisions of the Council's Constitution. Can I have a proposer, please?
To propose.
Sorry, I was drinking water then. Councillor Devon has proposed, and second.
I know it's very late, but I wanted to ask a question. I'm so sorry. I've just noticed something I wanted to
Yes,
ask.
you may do that because it's not quite finished.
Thank you. 8.4a, the council will not become involved if the deceased died outside of the district. The only exception to this is if they died while being an inpatient at the Lister Hospital in Stevenage or whilst being transported to or from there for treatment. My only question with that is if we have a resident that is in social housing and has been put through no choice of their own in a old people's home or supported living or an area belonging to the social housing company that is outside of the area that would not have been their choice, and they want to be, the family want them to be in, hypothetically, I've got a resident in Letchworth who gets put into supported living in Stevenage that's owned by the same housing association, but all the family lives in Letchworth. They want them buried in Letchworth. They're going to end up buried in Stevenage because that's where they've passed in that social housing through no choice of their own. I'm not wording this well. I'm having an ADHD moment. Frank, you get where I'm coming from.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to put it even further afield, if one of our residents is rehoused somewhere on the outskirts of Cambridge, outskirts of Cleethorpes, etc., would we still have the obligation, or would we still be willing to fund the burial? As per the policy, I would say we would prefer not to, and we would not. However, because this policy will be delegated to, as long as it's passed, to the director and the executive member, if they wish to override the exclusion, I see no reason why that couldn't be considered. If I could just add, we would be essentially unwilling to do so because there is always the risk that, and it does happen in our neighbouring authority, the local authority is used to fund the burial because the family members, remaining members of the family who are more than adequately able to fund the burial just choose not to. And we don't want, again, the imaginary scenario of someone on Costa del Sol being relocated back to North Herts to be buried at our local cemetery at our cost. So, thank you.
I get that. It was if it was a paradigm resident who'd then been moved through dementia to a, but yeah. Thank you for explaining that to me. I do apologise for the lateness of the question, Councillor Bryant.
A seconder for them. Would you like to second? Thank you.
With that being explained, happy to second.
Debate. No hands up. Shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 10, lease on Letchworth multi-storey car park. This is a referral from Overview and Scrutiny. Can I invite Councillor Claire Winchester, Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, to present the referral?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this was a really nice, it's a nice thing to have the opportunity to look at. The committee was very comfortable with the recommendation of the Director of Enterprise to surrender the lease on the Letchworth multi-storey car park as presented to us. The committee recognised the opportunity for better user experience and public facilities at no cost to the council. What I will raise is that the discussion did centre around what intangibles we might lose from giving this lease up. Although it was very much characterised as a no-brainer in strict financial terms, we do lose a little, perhaps, influence on things like prices, opening hours, and we should be mindful that this will then mean that we have a private competitor to North Herts District Council car parks as well in the town centre. We also lose the opportunity potentially to create a cohesive parking strategy for Letchworth Town Centre. And I think the only recommendations from the committee would be that those lines of communication with the Martin Group, who are proposing to take on the lease and maintain and deliver the services and improvements to the facility, that those communication channels should remain open. So yeah, the recommendation was to support that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Winchester. Any questions for Councillor Winchester? No. Can I ask Councillor Tamsin-Thomas to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present this report, which sets out the proposed surrender of the multi-storey car park in Letchworth at the request of Martin Group, who hold the head lease. The report was presented to Overview and Scrutiny at the last meeting, and I think was generally well received. The report provides an overview of the process undertaken by officers following the request from the Martin Group to bring our lease to an early end. The group is planning a regeneration of the shopping centre, which we welcome. And as part of this work, has approached the council to request an early termination, which was due to expire in 2037. The report sets out the negotiations that have taken place between council and the Martin Group, and they reflect issues that were previously presented to the political liaison board, to a briefing of Letchworth councillors, as well as ONS. In summary, they include ensuring that parking tariffs remain competitive with other local car parks, protecting parking provision for visitors of the town, for Letchworth's businesses, the council and its tenants, and maintaining effective parking enforcement. Those negotiations also included things like making a number of improvements to the existing facilities, such as improving opening hours, taking steps to reduce antisocial behaviour, and also for us to retain use of some of the facilities we use there. They're also looking at things like automatic number plate recognition, enhanced security measures, and as well. So officers have undertaken surveys to understand the current utilisation of the car park, and these show that there is spare capacity sufficient to accommodate any longer term objectives from the Martin Group in terms of residential use. They've also assessed the financial position, and it's estimated that ending the lease early would deliver a capital saving to the council of 3.4 million, alongside a revenue cost of approximately £430,000 over the rest of the lease. I think the benefits do weigh up the recognised costs. And I think the council already has an effective working relationship with Martin Group, the Martin Group, which already has a significant stake in the town centre. So I think those risks can be managed. So the recommendation is that Cabinet approve the surrender of the lease for the Letchworth multi-storey car park, and that's subject to that recommendation. Delegated authority is granted to the Director of Enterprise in consultation with myself to negotiate and approve the details of any surrender in line with the broad principles of the report. I want to thank in particular Steve Crowley and his team, who did a lot of diligent work on this. The Letchworth councillors did put him through a grilling to make sure that every aspect was considered, and I think that's represented in the report. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Thomas, what she said? No. So the recommendations, Cabinet, which are also the same recommendations from Open Scrutiny. 2.1, approve the surrender of the lease for the Letchworth multi-storey car park. 2.2, grant delegated authority, subject to recommendation 2.1, the Director of Enterprise, in consultation with the Executive Member for Enterprise, to negotiate and approve the details of any surrender in line with the broad principles in this report. May I have a proposer, please? Councillor Thomas. And a seconder? Councillor Wright. Thank you. To have a debate. If you pressed a button, oh, I've seen Daniel's, but not anybody else's. I've got a feeling that Ian was pressing. Councillor Albert.
I don't know if it's fastest finger first anymore or whatever. Look, I think I'm going to support the report. I mean, clearly, I think it's the right thing to the right thing to do. Financially, it's clearly the right thing to do. I mean, I think when we were looking at this, and I certainly attended, one of the briefing meetings. I think that those paragraphs that are set out in 8.12 of the report, which includes things like the tariffs, enforcement, the staff and tenant parking and so on, I think obviously were really key in terms of making sure that they were in the lease surrender and in the contracts that are going to be arranged. So I think that's some important assurances. I mean, I agree with I think one of the things that Claire said, towards the end, obviously we need, and I'm sure we will need, to keep obviously those discussions open with the Martin Group. That's clearly right. That's obviously an important thing to do, and I think that's some of those assurances are set out in that paragraph 8.12. So I think on balance, it was obviously that it is a car park that's near the our offices here, but I think on balance it is the right thing to do, financially and otherwise, and I think I would support the recommendations on that basis.
Thank you, Councillor Allen.
I think this is really exciting for Letchworth. With private ownership, they can do things differently to what we can. One of the big things will be the fact they want to have extended hours. At the moment, it's only open for 12 hours a day. This could bring a big change to Letchworth's nightlife, which needs a big change. So I think it would be a really good thing. The only thing I would point out during your introductory speech, Councillor Winchester, we've got two competitors in the town centre for car parking already. We've got the Heritage Foundation and Network Rail. Although anyone that would want to park in the Network Rail car park in Letchworth at the moment, good luck to them. So yeah, it's really good for Letchworth, and it's really good for us and our taxpayers.
Thank you. Any other comments? No. So we've got some proposed and second. We've had a debate. Shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 11, Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, RIPA, update and annual review. Referral from ONS. Can I invite Councillor Claire Winchester to present the referral?
Thank you, Chair. There was no challenge at all from ONS to these recommended amendments to the RIPA. It keeps this in line with current legislation and codes of practice, and we're very happy to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, any questions for Councillor Winchester? No. Councillor Daniel Allen to present the report then.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides Cabinet with the annual update on the Council's use of the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, or RIPA, and present the outcomes of the latest policy review. Members will see the purpose of this report is to ensure that our framework remains up to date, legally compliant and fit for purpose. Although the use of these powers is rare, it is important that they are available and they're governed by clear policy, proper oversight and robust safeguards. The proposed amendments help make sure our policies reflect current legislation and codes of practices, reduce legal and regulatory risk, and support transparency and democratic accountability. I'm therefore asking Cabinet to note the contents of this report and to adopt the amended RIPA policy set out in Appendix A. Thank you.
I was about to ask for any questions. I assume that wasn't a question. Any other questions? So the recommendations are that Cabinet 2.1 note the content of the report and 2.2 resolve to adopt the amended RIPA policy Appendix A. Can I have a proposal, please?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Allen, and a seconder, Councillor Debenham. Thank you. Debate. No debate. Shall we go to the vote, please, Susan?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 12, Section 106 Tasks and Finished Group Report. Referral from ONS. Can I invite Councillor Claire Winchester to give this referral?
Thank you, Chair. I want to first of all put on record thanks to all the members of the Task and Finished Group, including the Chair, and to thank all the consultees who provided responses, and in particular to Jeevan, the Scrutiny Officer, for her support of the whole process. This is a very well researched and very thoughtful report, and although we have the Chair here to answer questions and make further comment, I just want to make a couple of points, and those are that we are very unlikely to get the chance to do this again in this authority, so let's make the most of this opportunity. That the public care about this, and in the face of an acceleration in home building, existing residents do need to see evidence of benefits to them and for the right benefits to be coming through to those communities affected. The ONS committee considered all 8 of the recommendations in this report very carefully. Although some are very certainly much easier to implement than others, we had the opportunity to not put some forward to you, but we agreed that all 8 are very well worth your consideration. And we were very appreciative of and grateful for the supportive comments from some Cabinet members and officers in the ONS meeting. I just want to reiterate that it really was an in-depth discussion and it was very carefully considered. So, with your permission, Chair, I'll hand to the Chair of the Task and Finished Group to outline the report and questions. Thank you.
Councillor Munster.
Thank you very much, Chair. And as colleagues will know, because of the North Herts local plan, because of the increased housing targets from government, and because of the planning reforms implemented by government, which is going to result in an increased amount of speculative development, here in North Herts, we are going to see a significant amount of development over the coming decades that is going to materially change our towns and our villages. But too often, communities feel that development is being done to them, as opposed to local people and communities being at the centre of that process. And I was inspired to undertake this piece of work and to look into this issue in greater detail, because as someone who represents a number of communities of which have and will be impacted by development, over 1,000 homes will be developed within my county division, I hear so often the concerns of local people about where are the GPs going to go? Where are the schools? Where are the additional measures to relieve the pressure on our roads? And I know that I'm not alone when I hear those concerns on the doorstep. And the truth is that without adequate infrastructure, development is unsustainable. And unsustainable development leaves our communities worse off and does a disservice to our residents. What this inquiry has concluded is that there is a fundamental disconnect between the infrastructure priorities of communities and the infrastructure which is ultimately delivered through developer contributions. And the 8 key recommendations of which are before you tonight seek to close that gap. They seek to reduce that disconnect and close the gap between our communities and the councils which serve them, improve accountability, increase transparency surrounding the developer contribution process, and ensure that communities impacted by development in North Herts get the infrastructure they want and need. Now, as has already been mentioned tonight, we are going to be seeing, and we have seen, a great deal of change, not least because of planning reforms and local government reorganisation. And we know that developers at this current juncture are very much looking to expedite applications of which are contained within the local plan and speculative sites, because they want that certainty of an outline planning permission. Now, with Section 106, it is absolutely crucial that we get engagement as early as on in the process in order to influence the contributions and in order to secure the infrastructure which communities want. And therefore, I would submit to you that waiting and not implementing these recommendations in full would do a disservice to our residents, would leave our communities worse off, and would mean that our communities aren't able to fully reap the benefits of development within them. I would be very happy now to answer any questions that members of Cabinet may have as to the recommendations and the context behind them.
Councillor Debenham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Munster, Ralph. Yeah, I agree. Section 106 money is vital, and it is perhaps shrouded in a little bit of secrecy. I think what will happen, though, as we all know, is that loads of people will think that their need is greater than somebody else's. It should be our school that gets the money. No, it should be ours, blah, 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 blah. So I get that. If it's in the report, I apologise. Who do you envisage to be the final arbiter of when 2 opposing views are held within the same community?
So thank you very much for that. And I think it's important to recognise that, of course, there are 2 key authorities when we deal with Section 106. Of course, the bulk of Section 106 money goes towards the County Council for education and highways provision. And then, of course, there is, the pot of which is allocated towards communities. Within the recommendation, whilst this authority has no influence over the County Council's policy, recommendation, I believe it's 5, is about improving county councillor engagement, because there is a disconnect between the county council and communities, and it's about closing that gap, but making sure that there is democratic oversight and accountability as to which projects the county council is lending its support to and seeking to get contributions from. In terms of the infrastructure, which is more community focused and community based, in rural communities, what we would be seeking to do is ensure that parish councils have a far more active role in the process, because they are the ones of which are closest to the community. They do have more resource than our urban areas. And of course, they understand better the needs of those communities. Within our urban areas, we are in a bit of a tricky position, because of course we do have Royston Town Council, but within the urban core of Hitchin, Letchworth and Baldock, we don't have those lowest tier authorities. And therefore what the report is proposing is that area community forums take the lead on developing community infrastructure priorities. That is because, you know, it's an opportunity for communities to come together to discuss, but also it maintains that democratic oversight and that democratic accountability with the chair and the councillors of whom are members of that forum. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's excellent. Can I just have one very minor point? I don't know whether we're unique, but we're certainly in an unusual position, whereas all the county councillors that for this district are also district councillors. Did you envisage there being some kind of role for them as some kind of, I don't know what, a committee within itself to sort of be a bridge between the two councils?
So I can't say that we considered a formal committee as such, but certainly what we considered was the fact that the allocations which the county council are proposing shouldn't solely be determined or have oversight from county councillors themselves. We do want more district councillor engagement with that, and that's why recommendation 6 is surrounding the circulation of the HCC infrastructure prospectus to enable district councillors to identify where the HCC's priorities are for specific communities and potentially to influence those as earlier on in the process to ensure that those priorities that HCC are, putting it above and putting forward are more connected to the communities of which are going to be impacted by that.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel Allen.
Got a couple of questions, if that's okay, Chair, about this inquiry. First question, over the 9 months the Task and Finish group worked, how many individual officers were interviewed, and do you have recordings of the interviews that would have obviously been made to give feedback to members of the group?
So the way in which the interviews were conducted, whilst we don't have a specific recording, there were notes of which were taken by our committee services officers, and that did help the committee and the Task and Finish group members when drawing up these recommendations. That would prove very, very useful in referring back to those to make sure that we're able to fully identify and ensure any issues that were highlighted and ensure that we weren't actually going to be missing anything. With respect to the specific number of officers of which were interviewed, I can confirm that we had a formal discussion with the Director of Police. We had a formal discussion with the Development Control Manager at this authority, and then I can confirm that we also had a number of officers at HCC of whom attended our evidence session. But as you can see within the report, both the Director of Police and the Policy Manager has had the opportunity to comment, and we saw those comments prior to publication, and actually those comments proved to be very, very useful, and we did change some of the recommendations and some of the wording surrounding that following those comments, because I accept, and my colleagues do as well, that it is absolutely crucial that we are working together to find pragmatic ways forward to deliver better infrastructure for our communities.
Are you going to want a third question, aren't you?
I want my second question, please.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not going to want a third question. I'm still interested in how this will actually give infrastructure they want, because that's not what this policy does. My issue is recommendation 2, which I can't support this at the moment with recommendation 2. I can note it, no problems at all. But the utilisation of the community partnership officers, what was the opinion of the Community Partnership Officers management team as you were going through this and coming up with this? And why did you not speak to the Director of Regulatory when you are putting huge amounts of work on their team and just plucking this idea out of nowhere without support? Did you actually think about this at any point before the recommendation?
Do you answer about the conversations you had within the community team and regulatory team?
So in order to answer the first part of your question, the conversations that I had and my colleagues had with the community team. I think they were more off the record and informal conversations as opposed to, a formal evidence taking. But certainly from the conversations that I had with those officers within that team, whilst yes, there were some concerns as to the practicalities and to the training of which would be required in order to deliver this outcome, there was also an excitement, because those of whom are in our community partnerships team are people of whom are very much focused on getting the best outcomes for communities.
Ralph, that's a straight up lie. That is.
Can I just stop the procedures a moment, because I was just having a conversation with the managing officer, so that's why I was not doing my chair's duties properly. Just a moment while I finish this conversation. Mr. Munster, we've received voices of concern from the community team that in fact they were not aware of the formalities involved, that there was any formality involved with the conversations had with them, and that they were surprised when they found that in fact they were playing such, or expected to play such a major role in the plans going forward. Could you give us I'm not expecting officers' names, but could you give us the positions held of the officers that you actually spoke to formally in the community team?
Well, again, these conversations were informal conversations, but I will admit that they were not members of management. However, I did have a discussion with a manager to highlight that this was coming down the line and to seek her thoughts on this. And whilst there were some concerns raised, those concerns were taken into account when the recommendations of which were drawn up. But I think it's important at this point to answer the second part of Councillor Allen's question, which is as to sort of how this proposal was considered. And during the evidence that we heard from the Development Control Manager, we asked him about the role of the Section 106 officer and whether or not that officer would be in a position whereby they would be able to support communities as is expressed and set out in the report. Now, the concern of which was raised by the Development Control Manager was that in order to maintain the impartiality of the planning service in North Hertfordshire, it would be inappropriate for an officer situated within that department to undertake the role of which we are suggesting. And therefore, we had to look elsewhere within the council. Now, of course, I'd be very, very happy if there was an addition to the revenue budget for this year, whereby we have an additional officer or two to undertake this role if Cabinet were to feel that they were not comfortable with community partnerships officers undertaking it. However, based on the limited resources of this council, the Task and Finish group felt it was where this role and where the priorities should lie is very much with the community partnership officers, because they are the ones of which are closest to the communities. They have, from a council officer perspective, they are the ones who already have the contacts and the inroads within those communities. And in order to ensure that we were able to get the desired benefits as quickly as possible, they were deemed to be the most appropriate tool in order to achieve the desired outcomes.
Question. Who was the Cabinet member for communities at this point in your Task and Finish group, which actually, I mean, it's 24-25, it started in 24?
I think the bulk of the work was done. I'm trying to recall who was appointed as the executive member for communities. So it was you, and then
I'm just giving you a big clue here.
right. So no, it was you, Chair. But as we discussed at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, the reason why we didn't engage with you as the executive member for communities and the leader of the council, Councillor Allen, as leader, and then the executive member for governance, was because we felt that at the end of this process, their cabinet would be able to have its say. And we were very much conscious of working with officers to ensure that the proposals of which we were making were ones of which would be able to be implemented within the constraints of which this council operates.
That wasn't actually the answer to my second. Any more?
Thank you, Councillor Allen. No more of that. I'm going to regroup my thoughts here, because we have got the report, we have got the recommendations, some of which are very aspirational, but it is an area in which thought was needed to be given. We obviously, from your answers, there has been certain gaps in the process of actually getting the opinions of key players, but that now is in the past. I think I'm going to leave the rest for the debate, unless anybody else has got any questions to ask of Councillor Munsell. Right, so
it's not actually a question,
right,
but I was saving it for debate, but
it's up to you.
I go now. I mean, I actually welcome this report, and I did say at ONS how grateful I am to the Task and Finish group and officers for the time and effort they put into it. So I'd like to reiterate that. I do think there is a need for more clarity and transparency around Section 106. You know, it's really important that communities understand what's happening.
What you're saying really, would you like to say it for debate?
Yeah, sorry, I did say I was saving it for debate, but I thought you said
have to rewind.
go now.
Yes.
Okay.
Councillor Albert, have you got a question?
Yeah, I have. And obviously thank Ralph and colleagues for the work done on this. Was there a reason, Ralph, that your colleagues felt that actually having a discussion with the chairs of the community forum wasn't a good idea? This was quite a long running, piece of work, but I've seen in that, and obviously Councillor Winchester summarised it in her conclusion to that none of the chairs, including me, of the community forum were consulted. Was there a reason that you didn't do that? Or colleagues on because I know it wasn't only you on the Task and Finish group. In fact, I want to personalise it to you. It's you and colleagues on the Task and Finish group.
And I'm grateful, Councillor Allen, for you highlighting that this was indeed a cross-party Task and Finish group. I'm just fronting it tonight. In terms of the substantive question surrounding area forums, whilst yes, this was a long-running inquiry, the bulk of the work was done within, I believe, a 6-month period. A lot of groundwork had to be laid because we haven't actually done undertaken work of this nature for a significant period of time. So both from an officer perspective and from a member perspective, we were very much finding our feet. And I think when we sort of learn lessons from this process, maybe not to inform a Task and Finish group that this council might undertake, but potentially when we look to unitaries, that might be an area where we can highlight. But in terms of consulting chairs of area forums, effectively that we were working to a deadline, and unfortunately that deadline did not allow for further consultation with chairs of area forums. But I'd be very, very happy to sort of seek those views retrospectively. But yeah.
Shall we go on to the debate, or have we got more specific questions?
Can I just sort of follow? Because I think the question I think there to Ralph is, I think it's I'm a big advocate of community forums, and you know, actually, I'm a big advocate of area committees. Let me be clear. And so, you know, that's but I think the issue for me here, and I think, you know, as I say, it was summarised up in the recommendations, or the, you know, certainly, you know, Claire's sort of summary of it was around talking about the chairs of community forums should be consulted on how lists for community infrastructure priorities will be drawn up, as these were important. But I think the missing bit there, and I'm interested to kind of get your thoughts, is how that's to be done within the existing roles. And it's not just about changing the constitution of the community forum. It's actually fundamentally changing the way community forums work, and the kind of, and the support that they get in actually being able to draw up a list of community infrastructure priorities. Because part of the problem is that what we know is that in terms of Section 106, because this was a Section 106 report, is that the largest bulk of Section 106 actually is, as we know, swallowed up by county. In terms of, it's a school, or it could be something to do with NHS, it could be something to do with transport, or, you know, a station or something like that. But it's not things that I think it's easy for the community forums to do without significant support. So I'm interested to, but I like the idea, but I'm just interested to get your thoughts on how you thought this was going to work in practice, and what needed to be changed in order for a community forum, say Hitchin or Letchworth or wherever else, particularly in those unparished areas that haven't got a town council like Royston, how you thought this was going to be done, let alone obviously in the southern rural, which is even more kind of, you know, disparate in terms of lots of villages and so on. So just to get your sort of thoughts on the practicality of how that would and could be done.
So thank you for the question, and it certainly was something that came up at ONS the other week. I think when you look at parish and rural areas, the community engagement side of things is quite clear-cut, because you have those parish councils and they have that democratic authority and that oversight. Within unparished areas, that was where we had to try and come up with a bespoke solution. Now, we didn't feel that it would be worthwhile to try and reinvent the wheel, and we didn't think that actually there was a necessity to do that, because the risk is, if we talk about structures far too much, we can talk about structures for an awful long time. We actually don't then make progress, which is going to be seen on the ground by communities. So the rationale behind that was to try and utilize a structure of which is already there, which has democratic accountability and community engagement flowing into it, in order to get those community infrastructure priorities. Now, in terms of the resourcing, I think that's a very important point, but that's why the community infrastructure officers go hand in glove with this proposal, because they, of course, are then able to support the forum to discharge their responsibilities and to draw up the list of community infrastructure priorities. But equally, I think it's important to recognise that it wasn't the case where we thought, right, well, look, the July meeting of the Hitchin Area Forum, you know, this will be on the agenda. We'll get hundreds of people coming to the town hall, and that will be it. This is very much a process. It is of consultation, one would submit, much like local government reorganisation, the way in which that was done through the area forums. And ideally, this is a process of consultation of which would be undertaken within 3 to 6 months. But of course, the time frame would be determined by the area forums themselves. But in terms of how one would ensure that that is constitutionally appropriate, we would probably suggest amending the terms of reference of the area forums to include this responsibility within it.
Jack, can I just come back for another sort of question?
Certainly.
Where do you then see Sir Ralph, that tension between actually drawing up a list let's say, Hitchin meets and we could draw up a nice list of community infrastructure priorities, knowing full well that actually, in terms of Section 106, because this, I keep coming back, this is a Section 106 report, not a nice to have report. The Section 106 money largely goes somewhere else. It builds up an expectation that actually we could have this and we could have that. Actually, what we know is, if you look at, say, Highover Farm development, we know where that money is going. It's allocated. And it's very difficult for residents to say, or because if you ask residents, we will have a different set of priorities from the county council. And the county council say we need a new school. No, you might, or we need this or that or whatever. And I think this is, the challenge there, that where you see that tension between what is that in practice where most of the Section 106 money goes, and actually drawing up a list of nice to haves for Hitchin, Letchworth, Baldock, and so on. But to get your kind of comment around how you think of that.
A short comment, please. And we'll move on.
I will do my best, Chair. As you know, I'm not known for my brevity. I think it's important to be able to recognise that there are two roles that a councillor would play in this. The first would be talking about the more strategic stuff and having influence over the more strategic things, such as education, highways, all of that. And that is where, the influence would be far more behind the scenes, having discussions and engagement with officers and officials, etc. In terms of the community area forums, what we were trying to achieve with that was giving local people the opportunity to raise their concerns. And then it is up to councillors who have a democratic mandate to determine what is a priority, what is realistic, and what is deliverable. Because what we didn't want was our rural communities to have all of this additional support and be able to benefit from infrastructure far better than is happening in urban communities, and therefore our urban communities are left behind. Because for the sake of argument, a parish council, the chances are will put on their community infrastructure priorities, well, I want a playground on this specific site, and they'll be able to draw up the cost of, I don't know, £20,000. The risk is that if you don't have some structure which feeds into the 106 process in urban areas, that a playground, at Bancroft, which could be funded through Section 106 funding, isn't going to get that funding because there is no mechanism for the community and the elected representatives of that community to actually engage with the process itself. I mean, of course, individual councillors can go and put in their own suggestions, but I would submit that, a suggestion and a consultation response has far more weight when, officers are assessing 106 contributions if it comes from a cross-party group of councillors representing a town of, 30-odd thousand people.
What I'd like to do now is find out where I'm up to. Right, we've had questions. The recommendations are that the Cabinet, and the recommendations are the same for ONS. 2.1, consider recommendations 1 to 8 as detailed in Appendix 1 to report. Can I have a proposal and seconder? And then I'm going to make, I think I would like to lead this debate so that we can actually hold on to the really good things that are here. I'm not trying to lead you at all. If that sounds like leading, I'm sorry. First of all, so just so we can progress and go forward, can I have a proposal, please? I will propose. Can I have a seconder, please? And Councillor Wright to second. Thank you. So we can now go into debate. My personal views are that I've nothing against task and finish groups, although this authority actually has got very little experience of task and finish groups. In fact, we were trying to remember how many they've been, and we were back to 2016. So to have her as task and finish group was refreshing. I also think it's a good thing to have looked at Section 106, which is something which everyone's complained or just been nonplussed about for years. That is a good thing. To have the report is a good thing. The recommendations are ambitious. Some are more doable than others. Some are very aspirational. Some are based on discussions with officers, others less so. What I like to do is to hold on to the good parts of the report, but I think that we're not at the stage of actually accepting it as it is at the moment. That really we need to look at the principles that are put forward in the report and then the art of the possible, of what it's possible to do with these. And what I was thinking in terms of, and I'm sure that my colleagues will now give me their views on what I'm about to say, is that in fact we have a very small group of cabinet members, particularly the ones who are actually whose directorates are involved, which is Councillor Wright and Councillor Daniel Allen, to actually take this away and actually look at the principles and the art of the possible. So that is my starting point, and I'm happy for comments. Councillor Donna Wright.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying earlier, I do welcome the report. I think it does make some clear and practical recommendations. You know, I particularly welcome the focus on clearer communication, better training for parish councillors and indeed members, and also having a proper look at how we report on information and what we put on the website. I think a couple of the recommendations are a bit aspirational. They, you know, I think as Councillor Winchester remarked, you know, they may be difficult to fully achieve and enforce under the current national regulations, but there could be some sharp nudges we could introduce that could improve practice in those areas. So I think we could certainly make some progress. On recommendation 2, I mean, it is clear that the Community Partnerships Office isn't currently set up to offer this sort of service. And if we were to take it forward, it would need additional resource and appropriate training. I mean, it could be that that resource sits within planning. It couldn't obviously be the same officers that are negotiating on Section 106 agreements, as there would be a conflict of interest there. But if it was a separate role, it is possible. We could look at what other authorities are doing there, because I know that other authorities do have this facility to offer advice on Section 106. Personally, I think it would be a worthwhile investment in introducing more resource, but I recognise that budgets for next year are already set, so it may be something that we need to flag for a future unitary authority. But, you know, there does need to be further discussions here. But I don't think we should rule out recommendation 2. I mean, I would like to suggest that we accept the report, and as executive member for Place, I'm happy to work with the director of Place on how we respond to the recommendations and take forward some practical actions and have further discussions on some of the more challenging recommendations.
I'm just worried then that you shouldn't be seconding it if you're suggesting something different from what the chair has suggested.
The process is it needs to be proposed and seconded so we can go to debate. You don't have to actually nail your vote.
As far as the debate goes, I recognise the very hard work that's been put into this, and it's obvious that there has been a lot of work put into it. I'm upset by the fact that there hasn't been the communication with the people that it affects the most as far as recommendation 2 goes. There's been no communication with the area forum chairs, no communication with the director of governance, no communication with the leader at the time, no communication with the executive at the time. So what I would say is I can understand we want to see this go through because of all the good work that is in it. I couldn't possibly support it with recommendation 2. What I think this will need to lead to, and it's good to have the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny here, I think we need to have a review on how task and finish groups are done, because this hasn't been done to the best of the opportunities that it could have been. I think we need a set way of doing task and finish groups rather than an ad hoc way where we make it up as we go along.
I possibly take that separately with the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny outside this meeting, and to look at that. I'm looking at recommendation 2, and the problem seems to arise that an actual team has actually been identified when, and I can see the reasons from planning why they would recommend them, whereas from within that directorate, in fact, it would not seem to be a particularly reasonable thing to us to do. And I think that if we could actually broaden that out, so we're talking about utilising officers, and that then is looked at outside this meeting. So this art of the possible. So we've got the principles that in fact we do need to give training and support to parish councils, town councils, etc., but not actually specify which group are going to give it, given that all the things we've said about the actual process surrounding that. What do you think about that as a way forward? Councillor Albert.
So what I think there is a bit of a missing trick. There is a bit of a missing trick here in some senses, because I've seen the comments of officers within the Section 106 report. What I haven't necessarily seen is really a report coming to council with actual recommendations, not actually what's really on what's been asked here. But I think there is a way forward, as you've suggested, Chair, which is what we've been asked to do here is the recommendations 1 to 8 as detailed in Appendix 1 to the report be considered by Cabinet. Well, that's what we're doing. So I think we can all agree with that. So that's fine. Clearly, what we then do with it is another question altogether. That's why I'm very much about almost noting the report, but obviously then wanted to commission some further work. I think Councillor Winchester said at ONS that the chairs of the community forum should be consulted. Clearly, they haven't been up until now, and that is a piece of work that I think that would fit with recommendation 1. I think there is a discussion about how and who should do the recommendation 2. I think it's a shame this wasn't ready in time for the budget debate, because I would be quite sympathetic personally to actually seeing how we can find additional resource in some way or other in relation to this. And I think there is a further piece of work in working with Donna as the executive member, with officers around how that piece of work could be sensibly resourced and done. I actually think it better sits with planning, but recognising the conflicts and making sure that those divides are there between those people who do one job and those do another. I think a number of the other recommendations in there, the training for parish councils seems to be, well, yes, of course we want to provide training for parish councils. It's a shame they didn't actually turn up more often, but I think that's, absolutely. Do we want to improve communication reporting? Yes, absolutely we do, because that's why I brought a Section 106 report and the Hertfordshire County Council Section 106 report to the Hitchin Community Forum recently, because I felt that Section 106 was actually something we missed. Those colleagues here will remember Simon Ellis used to come round and do a report to the area committees back in the day. That's a report that dropped off the end when we created Community Fora, and I think was a missing trick. Improvement of county council engagement, of course, we need to do that because the fact there is a Hertfordshire Section 106 report, we need to make sure these things are all brought together. Circulation of the county council infrastructure perspectives. Well, that seems like, yeah, fair enough. That's just a circulation, but again, it helps to improve the communication and information. Developer engagement with communities, again, also makes sense. I'm feel less expert about the developer contributions paying for 9 properties or less, but again, I'm happy to get officer advice around that. So for me, I think we want to, to say we're noting the report, but we'd like to commission, I think, some of the further work that is necessary, I think, out of this. But we are.
I can take over. We're perfect here.
That's right.
How about 1, we note the report. 2, Cabinet tasks the exec member for place and exec member for governance, together with relevant officers, to further consider the recommendations, develop proposals for report to a future meeting of Cabinet. Shall I say it again?
Yep.
I know that Tamsin's waiting to speak. Did you get that, or shall I say it again?
Good. Yeah, I did. Could I have an additional thing? I think as part of that is where we should be consulting the chairs of the community forum. I think that's it's an important piece of work to be done.
No.
I'll just Tamsin. I jumped in before Tamsin, but that's what I'm proposing. Okay, but I'm very happy to continue taking comments, Tamsin.
Sorry, Chair, I keep on pressing my button and it keeps on turning off. So in each debate, I've had to push the button like 5 times. And so if I'm frustrated at the button, not at the chairing, just for the record. I wanted to sort of ask Councillor Wright. I think in the report, for the recommendations, it's hard not to accept most of them. I think there are questions about the design of task and finish groups and how we design the consultation list. And that's a technical thing on how you design a task and finish group, which I don't want to get sort of too lost in for this. Yeah,
We'll
no,
take it out
I know that. But I just wanted to ask sort of Councillor Wright in terms of sort of thinking through LGR. It feels like there's a lot here to me that might not be quite on our shoulders as the lead authority to be sort of taking forward these recommendations, and certainly not effectively for some of them. But the substance of them, the principle of them, is still hugely valid for an area where there is so much. Trying to navigate 106 as a councillor with the support of officers is a nightmare, let alone if you're a general member of the public. So I think the scrutiny has been really welcome. But just sort of your thoughts on which parts of this you think are where we can meaningfully make a start on maybe looking at them and integrating them into our practice fairly swiftly, or where do you see a real opportunity with LGR for us to bring certain more clarity to some of them in terms of the substance of the principles, as opposed to a debate over who does what and which authority does what? Thank you.
Well, I think Councillor Albert's kind of been through them, really. I mean, I think there are some ones that are easier wins. I think the training is definitely something we can instigate ASAP. It should have been happening. I mean, maybe we need to look at how we provide it. If the attendance was poor in the past, maybe there's other ways of doing it. So, that's an easy win. Upgrading the web page with clearer information. There's the infrastructure funding statement that's already on the website, but I personally don't think it's the most accessible document. So we could look at improving that and improving the website. So there's lots of quick wins that we can do, and then obviously some of the trickier recommendations needs further discussion, and it may be that they're things that we recommend to a future unitary. But we need to have those discussions.
Thank you. Can I just say that the last training that I could find was for Section 106, which involved parish councils, was January 2025. Councillor Wright, you had your hand up in your own right.
Yes, I was going to ask, does it need to come back to Cabinet? What's the the
Yeah,
governance process? Because obviously it was originally considered by ONS. So I'm really showing my ignorance here
Yes.
of governance
Well,
processes.
my recommendation is it comes back to a future meeting of cabinet. So it just comes back. It comes back here.
Or a new,
Yes,
I'm
they
not
are.
sure what the process is.
It's not something we've used very much, or they've got very much experience of. So any other comments? So what I'd like to do is change recommendations to 1, note the report, 2, cabinet task the exec member, place exec member governance together relevant officers to further consider the recommendations and develop proposals for report to a future meeting of cabinet. Shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Do you wish to have a break?
Yeah.
Yes. Shall we have a break until 9:25 ish? Thank you. Thank you. Item 13, Council Delivery Plan 2025-26, Quarter 3 update. Referral from ONS. Can I invite Councillor Claire Winchester, please, to give the referral?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so obviously we get to look at this quarterly, as do you, and have an opportunity to comment on progress against the Council Delivery Plan. I think it's fair to say that the conversation at committee could be characterised as focusing on the monitoring, the burden of monitoring a number of complex projects at the same time and the potential risks around that. We're very pleased to receive a lot of reassurance about the precise timetables that are being kept to, the close scrutiny of these complex projects. But there are still more details to come on some of those, so there are still risks, there are still uncertainties. And I think we reflected that a lot of this effective management of these complex projects, like Churchgate and things like that, are very much going to depend on officer capacity and retention as well. So if we are struggling to recruit or retain officers and staff, then we are going to find ourselves, with problems monitoring that. As I say, we were given a lot of reassurance, but I think the committee is minded that we will be keeping a close eye on that, and we note that we can, of course, do that in between the quarterly reports through the IdeaGen platform, and in fact do that as well. So yeah, that was recommended that we had nothing to add beyond that, I would say, but just that we are keeping a close eye because we recognise that this is a lot of things to juggle at the moment. But thank you.
Any questions, Councillor Winchester? No. Can I ask Councillor Ian Albert to present the report?
Just thanks, Chair, and thanks, Claire, for that update and the overview and scrutiny consideration. And I think probably just starting on where you sort of finished, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think we've got some really number of key projects going on at the moment, and obviously that we will always keep to monitor. It's not, I think, a huge issue in those projects. There's some issues elsewhere, but in making sure we have got the right capacity to deliver and retain staff and so on. And obviously we've tried to set some money aside for LGR purposes, but that also helps in general in terms of officer capacity and recognising that that peaks and troughs of LGR then has impacts on other key projects and so on that those same officers also have to deliver. So very much looking at those things that that there as you are, and looking at the performance and obviously reporting back on that through the delivery plan. We've and obviously apologies that I wasn't able to attend overview and scrutiny, but I upgraded the person delivering the report in Councillor Bryant, so that is probably way better than me delivering it. It's worth saying that one new project has been added to the plan, which is the museum collection facility project. We've completed 3 projects: the King George skate park in Hitchin, the Waston Street cleansing contract implementation, which had been completed by the Q2 report, and the project to engage the community on our finances is also now completed through the budget survey that was done in advance of the budget meeting back in February. It was welcome that the improved budget position that we found ourselves in, that all helped, I think, in terms of being able to set, I think, what is a really positive and effective budget at our meeting that was, I think, widely supported across the council. As I say, the museum collection facility project's been added to delivery plan. Probably also worth saying, just while I remember, we've had our first meeting of the Royston Learner Pool project, and no doubt that will also be added as we go to the delivery plan. The paragraph 8.3 sets out the two projects with an amber delivery status. That's the digital transformation and Churchgate. Clearly, at the moment, we're going through a number of member workshops, and obviously, I attended the one last night, which was really valuable. Obviously, encourage colleagues to attend. I think there's two more. I'm looking. Councillor Thomas is nodding there. I think one tomorrow, but I think there was around lunchtime. So really encourage members to attend those where they can. And I think that obviously helps to set out the work we're doing in relation to the Churchgate project. Paragraph 8.5 sets out the actions been taken to address the two key performance indicators that were noted as red. That was related to Careline installations and to the customer service centre calls. And again, obviously looking at how those things, trying to remedy those things. We've talked about certainly an overview of scrutiny before, about the performance information on waste collections that was available. We have now, and the overview of scrutiny had, I think, at the sort of almost immediate on the day report of a data split between East and North Herts, and the data we had that showed there were I think 260 missed bins in March 25. It increased to just over 1,100 in August at the service change, but by February it was back down to 400, and work is ongoing to get that back down even further. So I think that's kind of welcome progress in relation to that particular aspect and that important key performance indicator in terms of missed bins. Paragraph 8.9 sets out the work that's been carried out as we move towards the 26-27 year. In relation to the adding new KPIs linked more directly to the council plan. I think just probably a couple of other things, Chair, just to mention. I think obviously Claire touched on the big projects that we've got, like Churchgate, museum collection facilities, which have got some very specific timelines, and obviously clearly local government reorganisation obviously is always factored into that. It's worth also just obviously mentioning, as was discussed at scrutiny, that the aiming to report the next report on Churchgate were presented to the Cabinet in June, but not full council. But future reports on Churchgate would be considered at full council once delivery plans have been finalised and the project needed a budget approving. And as I mentioned earlier, we're obviously having those workshops and obviously and updating members with where we are up to currently. And probably just to conclude, Chair, I think in cover that they also had a message that yesterday from officers that in relation to the Charnwood project, we've gone out to tender for a state sort of company to lead on the sort of marketing expressions of interest exercise that will be done on Charnwood, and so I'm hoping that will be concluded fairly shortly, with that exercise then beginning, and obviously encouraging local organisations to express an interest and as to how they might be able to work with the council to open up Charnwood as the community hub that we've all been long since wanting to see. So I think again we'll be able to report back a little bit more on that at a future council delivery plan. I think I will finish there, Chair, but obviously happy to answer questions. Obviously got Mr. Cooper also available to answer the more difficult questions.
Do we have any easy or hard questions? Or medium questions? No? The recommendation that Cabinet Note progress against council projects and performance indicators as set out in the council delivery plan Appendix A, and approves new milestones and changes to milestones. Have a proposer, please? That's Councillor Albert, and a seconder, Councillor Daniel Allen. Should we go to the debate? Councillor Allen?
While I do understand their risk reports, it's also very exciting to see all the different things that North Herts Council are doing successfully, and bringing forward ahead of LGR.
It is. Anybody else? Should we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 14, third quarter Treasury Management Review 25-26. Referral from FAR. We haven't got Councillor Papalasingam, have we? So are we going straight to Councillor Albert?
Yeah, I'm not trying to sort of just reflect the the key points that, and obviously that FAR discussed. Just in overarching sort of terms, what we're expecting a small increase in the interest earned on investments during the year. That's up to 2 million. Clearly, the current financial situations, we will see, and as we'll talk on other reports, will clearly fluctuations in relation to that with the current international situation. We've conformed with the Treasury strategy throughout Q3. As you'll see there, the majority of our investments are currently with local authorities due to the balance of security and yield they're offering. This was one of the things that that FAR discussed. I think it was around 82% of the council investments were in local authorities. We obviously discussed, and FAR discussed the risks in relation to that, and certainly they also discussed around where you can see that funds are maturing, and we clearly then reinvest those funds. So it's very much a continuing process in reinvesting funds in the best places, and obviously as we go forward in line with our new investment strategy policies that we agreed at the last full council at the budget meeting. So yeah, I think they were the main things that that FAR discussed, and I'm happy to move the report, Chair.
Any questions? Councillor Daniel.
So just for the record, obviously we've got wonderful investments with some great local councils. What happens with LGR and the councils changing? Are we aware of how that will affect it yet? Just so that we have that for people that may not know.
Yeah.
The balance sheet and therefore all the investments would transfer to the successor unitary authority. In some case, that might be splitting it around, depending what happens, but in essence, that's what will happen.
Thank you. Any other questions? So the recommendation, 2.1, note the position of Treasury management activity as at the end of December 2025. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Albert. I can have a seconder, please. Councillor Wright, thank you. Debate. No, shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 15, third quarter capital budget monitoring review 25-26. Again, we do not have Councillor Pupala Singham, so Councillor Ian Albert to present the report.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Again, there weren't too many questions from the Finance Committee in relation to that. Well, one of those was around the Royston Bandstand, Priory Gardens, which I'll touch on in a moment. And I think obviously separately, I think there was a question for our independent member. We have an independent member, John Cannon, on the committee, which I think is extremely valuable, and I think he'd picked up a potential discrepancy, I think, there between the papers, which I think Mr. Cooper has now rectified. But again, obviously, I think certainly John's contribution to the finance meetings, I think is really important, and I think it's the only committee where we've got that kind of independent members on standards and elsewhere. But it's a very particular and important role on the finance committee. In terms of not too much to say in relation to the capital monitor. The table 2 obviously sets out the request for where projects have moved into 26, 27. Table 3 incorporates a couple of underspends around the waste projects, the purchase of the new paper and cardboard bins, and providing EV charging at the Letchworth depot. And table 4 shows that the 16 million of the capital spend this year will need to be met from borrowing, but as set out in the Treasury strategy, this will call us from internal borrowing from our existing funds, not going externally to actually borrow money. I think really just to obviously asking Cabinet to note the forecast in the recommendations, approve the adjustments, but I say obviously just I think hopefully Cabinet will agree it's not a huge amount of money, but actually approve and change the scope of the Priory Gardens Bandstand project from renovation to rebuild, and an increase of the budget in 26-27 by 25,000. And I think hopefully that will be welcomed by Cabinet, welcomed as another project, as Councillor Allen mentioned, another thing that we are doing as a council, and doing as a council in Royston as well, adding on to the Learner Pool project. So something I think that's really important, and obviously asking you to note the position of the availability of capital resources as detailed in table 4, paragraph 8.6, and obviously our requirement to keep the capital programme under review. So happy to move those recommendations, Chair.
Thank you. Can we propose it, please? Councillor Albert, and a second, please. Councillor Amy Allen. Debate. Councillor Amy Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Among many things I'm very excited about new projects that are coming. I love a new project. Ask me about my garden. And other things. The Royston Town Bandstand in Priory Gardens, I'm so thrilled that this is going to be getting a full replace, because along with many other groups that do use it, the Royston Arts Festival every year make full use of that space and that bandstand. And without it, they would have to raise quite a lot of money to be able to bring in a stage of their own. So it's just really, and there's a lot of people very passionate about how it's used and what they get to do with it. So a really lovely key community thing over there in Royston, and we get to now replace it and give them a nice big upgrade. So I'm very excited about that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Thomas?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Albert, thank you for this report. I wanted to check in on a couple of the items. We were having to reforecast funding lines because of vacancies. So, for example, the green infrastructure implementation. I think there's sorry, I've missed my reference now. Bear with me. Sorry, Chair. I've lost it. My question substantively is where projects are being deferred due to officer vacancies being filled in the next current year. What we're thinking about in terms of LGR contingency, but I'm going to take my question and come back once I've got my references regathered. So apologies, Councillor Albert.
Councillor Donna Wright.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the Alton Head Common Weir. I think there's a mention that we're waiting for HCC to confirm if the project can be externally funded. I mean, I thought we'd already put a sum aside for this and it was due for completion. So I'm just a bit confused. So are we?
I mean, obviously there's a report in the council delivery plan, which obviously talks about that obviously we're working with CMS and them getting a contractor in to do the work. We have set aside some money, but I don't know, Mr. Cooper, you want to kind of comment specifically whether you think there's any additional funding expected from HCC, but obviously CMS, the Countryside Management Service, are working with us in doing that work.
Yeah, I think there is an expectation we'll get some funding from either HCC or the Environment Agency towards the project. Obviously, if we can get their money from them, that's better than spending our money. And I think they've also got an interest in it in terms of the overall impact of that watercourse.
Still, the timetable is due for completion at the same time.
Yeah, the timescales as set in the council plan are still valid at the moment. Obviously, there could be further delays, but I think they're still valid at the moment.
Thank you.
Councillor Daniel Allen.
Just very excited about the fact that we've now got the work being carried out on the playground renovations at Howard Park. There is some very exciting new play equipment being put in now, and I can't wait for it to settle and set so that it's ready to be used when we refill the paddling pool.
Any other contributions? Councillor Thomas, may I come back to you? Have you found yourself?
I have. No, it's apologies. And Councillor Albert. It was the cycle strategy implementation and transport plans implementation. There's a reference there that the projects were having to be deferred due to a lack of resources, but that the transport officer post has recently been recruited and will be looking at projects there. I just always conscious of the impact with LGR deadlines, whether that those bodies of work will be able to be rephased.
I don't know if you want to comment. Let me say we'll always keep the capital program under review. As we said earlier, as I think response to Councillor Winchester, clearly officer capacity and obviously having officers available is clearly been an issue in some areas. I think, I mean, in relation to that, yeah, we're in keeping it under review. We will obviously then begin to need to look at timelines and what is doable within the LGR window. At what point we need to go and talk to other people about particular projects. But I mean, I don't really. If there's anything specific you wanted to add here, sort of Ian, in terms of how you see the future in terms of projects that are on our books, and as we move towards sort of LGR more specifically.
Yeah, and clearly once we get to the 1st of April 2028, it will be the new unitary to decide what projects will continue from that point. In the interim, we have a lot of control over existing projects, albeit that as we move into kind of transition arrangements, bigger projects may come under scrutiny and may be focused on by shadow authorities. They will have to set what kind of limit they want to set in terms of where they want to have their interest, because clearly they've taken on quite a broad scope of things, and it could be that some of these smaller ones will fall below that limit, whereas some bigger projects will be above that limit. So I think it's for them to decide where they're going to focus on in terms of ratifying future decisions we're going to make. Clearly, over the next year, if we can get progress on it in the current year, as in 26, 27, it does still fall under our kind of remit at that point. I don't have specific updates in terms of those officers, but clearly that officer is now in post in that example, so I hope we can make some progress.
Any more contributions to the debate? No? Shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 16, third quarter revenue budget monitoring for 25-26. Councillor Ian Albert to present.
Thanks, Chair. Let me just going to quick scroll through to the referral, just make sure I don't pick up anything specific from that. I think the main focus around the FAR considerations were about understanding, where there were underspends and overspends being declared. I think looking at, as we've touched on earlier in council delivery plan sense, about any financial risks in relation to Churchgate, and there was highlighted in the report that funding was provided for the current stages of the regeneration project, but clearly there were always issues with letting a shopping centre, but it was still generating income, and there clearly would need, in longer term, be a stage where the council would need to set a large capital budget aside for Churchgate regeneration. Also touched on around the commercial refuge and recycling, where there's some increased competition and businesses were minimising their waste, which had created a drop in income. But I guess that's overall better for sustainability, and clearly work was being done to encourage recycling collection rather than residual non-recyclable waste. And then obviously there was the issue about backdates in audits to relating to housing benefits, and I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail in a moment. In full terms, the reason for variances on the revenue budget was shown in table 3. The end of March 25, the council did not have a borrowing requirement. We had funded all our capital from grants of capital receipts, so we aren't required to have a minimum revenue charge in the 25-26 budget, but we obviously talked about that earlier, that the changes will be in 26-27. Now, as a detail at the end of table 3, there is a variance relating to housing benefit subsidy loss. The description details that we expect there to be further costs over the next couple of years relating to this too. As part of the 21-22 housing benefit audit, we were notified of a requirement that even though the client is not paying the cost of the accommodation, they should be notified of the cost for us to claim in the housing benefit. The audit has finally concluded, and it's been confirmed that we will need to cover this shortfall. Whilst we put in place measures to correct this when we were made aware of it in early 24, this means that there's still a further period between April 22 and early 24 when we expect the audits of those years, 22-23, 23-24, will find a similar issue, and in that instance we would need to fund a further subsidy gap from our reserves. There were 2 corporate health financial indicators in table 4, the leisure centres management fee for paying everyone active during the decarbonisation works, and the commercial refuse and recycling services, which I touched on just now. The positive from table 5 is that the number of visits to our leisure centres has still increased since last year, even with the decarbonising work and some required closures. There's no change in funding forecast, so table 7 reflects the variances in table 3. And I think the only other thing I'll probably just to mention that I haven't touched on earlier on, there was a slight increase in car parking income, although average ticket prices had reduced, meaning the volume of purchases had increased, which showed a faster turnover in car parks, which may be an early signs around, the changes to the parking machines and so on. But as I say, the funding summary showed in terms of funding that the council was in line with the budget forecast. So, Chair, happy to move those recommendations that are in the report.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Debenham, thank you. We go to debate. Shall we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all your hard work this evening to members and officers and for the whole year. I close this meeting. It's the last one of the civic year. There we are.
Thank you.
25, 26, done. Thank you. Cameron.